To put into context, this is the Budget Committee. And at least today, I think we're talking about budget. I've been on it as the committee I was most interested in being on since I got here 4.5 years ago. And we've not even gotten to first base on a budget resolution that was accepted broadly, let alone a budget. So I'd like to ask the chairman of the Budget Committee, this senator here had to take as a privileged motion a budget to the floor about a year ago. And that's when it doesn't get done in the regular order of business. Would you commit to you and I at least working when the new fiscal year starts on October 1st, that we will bring a budget to the Senate floor that we craft here and spend the time on the Budget Committee through regular order, like you do everywhere else, to get a budget that we would at least get out of this committee?
I'm going to have to wait and see how the present circumstance plays out, because if the House Republicans set off the default hand grenade that they are negotiating with right now, we are in a very different world, and I can't predict that world.
Well, let's assume that doesn't happen.
What I've already said I will do is to get back to work on the NZ White House budget reform proposal that can lead in that direction and set up the terms for precisely the conversation you want. I think we've talked about this before. Yeah. My recollection is that you were favorable. Senator Kaine has been here. I think we've got some real bipartisan interests there, and I will pursue that. I think we're pretty comfortable with the president's budget. So I don't know that we need to do more. That's now between the White House.
I think if we're committee, we ought to use it through regular order to at least put something out there. The other House needs to do that as well. So let's get to what I've observed. Other places, everywhere else, you don't have the printing press in the basement, and you do not have a credit card that is automatically renewable. I think that's the context that we work within here. Obviously, that would be pandemonium anywhere else. Sooner or later, things like your sovereign currency are at risk. We saw what happened in Europe when Greece, Spain, Portugal, and Italy fell off the wagon not too many years ago, got them back in line. And my observation has been that the ability for our unique economy to raise revenue, we ought to at least look to see what that maximum amount would be without threatening economic growth. And here's a statistic that I have not heard anyone mention, that is over 50 years, regardless of the tax rate, we generate about 17.5% to 18% of our GDP in revenue. So that means through high rates, obviously, you get lower economic growth. The Trump tax cuts, those were chump change. If you give the full $150 billion to them, that would only be 7% or so of our current structural deficits. So my question is going to be to every one of you, and give me a fairly brief answer because I'm going to have another one. Is that a reasonable place to be than to where we just live within it? Is there more capacity? Is there not? Tell me why. Only 3 times, I think, during the Clinton years did we hit 20% of our GDP in tax revenue. We'll start over with Mr. Zandy.
I think there's more room. I think the average revenue to GDP is about 18%, but I think there's more room, and there needs to be because of the aging of the population. There's more folks that need Social Security and Medicare, and that is a significant, just keeping spending per person constant in real dollars.
Do you have a level that you think that you'd be comfortable with that wouldn't strain economic growth and that would be reasonable?
Yeah, I think somewhere between 20 and 22% in that range. Yeah, and I think that'd go a long way to addressing our long-term fiscal issues. But we need spending restraint on top of that.
And by the way, that would be about 3 to 5% lower than where we're currently at, with $7 trillion divided by our, what is our GDP, like 26 trillion roughly?
25.
Okay, so we're way above 25% currently, and that's not sustainable. Ms. Hooper, what do you say?
Of course, I was talking long run, not.
Yes, I know long run. Ms. Hopper.
Yes, I will say I am the attorney, not the economist again, so I will defer to my colleagues here.
Okay.
I've modeled out the tax numbers, and you could probably get to about 20% of GDP tops, especially on terms of taxing the rich. You can throw every proposal out there that we've seen on taxing the rich. You'll get about 2% of GDP from that. And with spending going to 30% of GDP, you got a ways to go.
And I'll echo Mr. Rito's point. In my lifetime, basically, the long-term average for revenues, average is 17.4%, to your point. When you get above 18, there's calls for tax cuts. When you get below, there's calls for revenue increases. That's kind of the historical. Even if we have range going up to 20, let's just give ourselves that there's some flexibility to go to 20. 2033, we're going to have 25% of GDP in outlays. That's the big gap. So you can't make it up all on revenue.
So right here, historically, we've got 18%. Let's round it up a 0.5%. We have one witness that says 20 to 22%. We're currently approaching 30%. So, Mr. Chairman, I would think that one simple way to get bipartisanship would be to at least establish what the capability is of this federal government and then live within it. Because otherwise, you're ending up basing this on an increasingly indebted economy, which now puts us only number 2 to Japan in terms of percentage of debt, debt as a percentage of our GDP. And to me, that's a shameful, bad business plan that is not sustainable.